Yeah, I just want to have a sync conversation in order to reach to some sort of an agreement or resolve the discussion on that issue that I've linked. And basically, we have two things that we need to resolve. Is one is which syntax are we going to use in order to opt in the JWT token per job. So we have like a couple of options. One of them is just to use the secret keyword, which Brad suggested, but I know, Marshall, you had some comments on that. The other one is to configure the token within the secret block itself. And this is what, Marshall, you've suggested. If you want to, like, both of you, like, verbalize and explain, like, the thought process here, so we can try to resolve this discussion quickly.
Looks like Marshall, you're on mute.
Thanks, Mark. So my understanding of why, like, the thought process behind that was that we were trying to come up with something that was clever and would avoid users having to specify anything, basically like avoiding a breaking change, like making the default template work the way that it does today, essentially. Which, you know, I already debate like the value that provides, given that I think one of the root problems is that the JWT token injection is an opt-in. I think, like, from a security perspective, you want that to be explicit, and so anything that is going to result with a token being implicitly injected into one or all jobs by default, I think is not what we ideally want, right? And then the second big thing is that the proposal specifically is talking about extending secrets with top level keywords that have behavior that is specifically related to the injection of a JWT token. Two problems with that. One, this block of the YAML syntax, it already has key value pairs where key is our environment variables and the value is the configuration for how to inject that secret, right? So I think breaking that convention is not a good idea, because you'd expect all top level keys to be environment variables, and environment variables can be lowercase, right? So that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then two, there's nothing that's specific to JWTs necessarily with secret injection, right? So having top level keywords under secrets that are specifically related to JWTs, I think limits what we can do in the future. So that being said, like, I think it does make sense to consolidate and not have a separate top level like token keyword necessarily. I think there is an opportunity to have all this functionality exist within the secrets keyword, but what was proposed, I think, is not the right solution. And I tried to come up with something that I think might fit the bill, and I'll paste it in the link in the Zoom chat if other folks aren't already looking at the issue thread. But you know, similar to how the vault keyword within secrets works today, like, we could also have an ID token keyword that would generate a JWT and then set it as, you know, whatever environment variable key you specify.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not mixing terminology. When you say like top level keyword, so the idea on secret is not to use it as a top level keyword, but it will be nested underneath the job. So secret will be underneath job. And when you specify secret underneath job, because usually when we say top level keyword, we mean, like, you know, the top one, and it is nested underneath the job. And when you specify secret, you actually specify, okay, opt in the JWT token for this job that have secret. So if you want to opt in multiple jobs, you need to add secrets nested underneath the job itself. And yeah,
that makes sense. I when I said global, I meant like to the job. Like we were already on the same page. I think honestly, like if whether I don't know if secrets is already supported as like a global keyword or not. It sounds like you're saying that it's not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Now thinking about it, I'm not sure, because if it is, then
I think it's okay if it is.
Not.
I think it's okay to globally opt into things, right? I'm just saying that like that needs to be an explicit thing, right?
Secrets is not a true global. It is per job. And in fact, I ran into it and I wish there was a global version of it, just like variables, right? But variables act differently than secrets. So secrets have to be specific, or you have to use like a YAML anchor on every job, which is basically the same thing. But
we can find a solution for, by the way, we can find a solution later on to make it like a global, like for instance, nested underneath default, but we can take it separately. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think those are all really valid points. I think where I was coming from when I suggested bringing it into the secrets stanza was more around simplification and not yet another area for configuration, right? And it, what other expansion is there? So there's JWT token, but there's also CI. There's also the CI token that's been around a lot longer and has a kind of a very different behavior, right? That's automatically injected into every job. That's not opt-in. Those are things that I was thinking of in that. And then also giving a path towards linking JWT and secrets together because they provide similar functionality, but not the same, right? Like one is a premium feature, the other one is in core. You have to roll your own, secrets secrets access with JWT, which gives us expanded use cases around like AWS. Whereas we don't have that in we only started with Vault. Now we could expand that later, but be nice to see how we go from Vault to other providers underneath there.
I absolutely agree that I think that we can leverage the secrets keyword instead of having a new token keyword.
I like your proposal here, this one where you put ID token under the environment variable, CI job JWT. Would that be any variable based on how you have it, and we would take that input, or would it have to be CI _ job _ JWT? Or would any variable with ID token and an audience essentially become a JWT token?
That's right. Any variable. And this also allows you to inject multiple tokens with different variables that have different audience claims or any other claims that we support in the future.
That would actually be good. And I think clarifying that if you had, instead of CI job JWT, any variable 1 ID token, any variable 2 ID token, different audience, those kind of things. I think that works out well because people, could probably put that into an existing script or substitute an existing variable where they may have had a static token before or something.
Yeah, and I think like to your point about the fact that like other tokens are injected by default, I think that's also problematic. I think that we also shouldn't have done that. And I think that like, again, those use cases where tokens are automatically injected, we can move those to the secrets keyword over time as well. Like for example, I think currently every job in the pipeline has the same level of access to the container registry, right? That's not good. You don't want like a random lint job to be able to read or write necessarily from the container registry. And so making all of that opt-in, I think, is ultimately the direction that we need to head. This is just the first step.
I agree, but I really want us to focus on that specific subject and not open it broadly to like all the tokens that we have. I mean, we can roll out like different breaking changes. Like if we think that this is like the right behavior, we can definitely mitigate those. And if it's like if it's a security risk, we can even do it in the middle of a milestone. We don't need to wait for .0 in order to introduce like a security enhancement. So it doesn't need to wait for like next year. But for this specific scenario, I would like to have it ready for 15.0 because users expect to have a breaking change in 15.0, and if we'll be able to come up with the right convention and the syntax, then we might have like a window of opportunity to implement it in 15.0 without, getting a lot of angry comments from users. So, like, if we are looking at Marshall, on your comment, which from what I'm getting from Red is also something that is desirable. So I just want to understand the idea here is that secret will be nested underneath a job, right? Like when you want to opt in a token, you specify job, you specify secret, and then we have like the CI job JWT, and you mentioned that it could be like any variable or any secret variable, I guess. But my concern here is that again we are making like this feature bigger than that we'll be able to handle for this iteration, and this will require like additional discussion, because basically what we are doing here, if I understand correctly, is that we are creating our own secret in GitLab. Like we can define any secret you want, you can add like any idea to the secret, and basically you will create like a handful of secrets, which is something that we can definitely discuss, but I think this needs to discuss in a broader level with the product organization, and make sure to have like the right allocation and the whole process that we need to do in order to introduce a new feature in this size. And I think for now we really need to contain it to right now we have a problem. The JWT token is by default opt-in to any job. Let's try to come up with a syntax just for that token for now to mitigate this problem, because we have an opportunity and we can take the discussion about like and I think we have an epic on secret. We can take this discussion and we can create a business case. So we'll be able to get like the right funding and the right engineers to build that kind of solution. That's my thinking here.
If you only,
sorry, go ahead.
If you only want to solve the opt-in problem, inclusion of secrets, blank or not blank, right? If nothing underneath it, that could work. But the two other requirements around a customizable audience field, we got to have a place for that. Like, where do we, where does that come from? Because that'll live for a long time too.
I agree. We'll definitely need this, and that's the second question that I have. Do we need it in the first iteration? Because right now today, users cannot customize the audit claim. It's not the desirable experience that we want. I agree. We want to fix that. But what I'm suggesting is like just use the secret stanza or the secret keyword to opt in. And then in the next iteration, we'll tell user, hey, in 15.0, you weren't able to customize the audit claim, but in 15.1, now you can do that. And
yeah, the reason I think that like both are important is because like leaving either one of them as is compromises the like security of the user's setup. So the implication with not making the audience claim configurable is that whatever provider the user is trying to use that token with, they have to disable audience claim validation on that end, right? Like, and for context, the audience claim in the JWT spec, it's intended for consumers of JWTs to validate that this token was issued for that service. And the reason you want that is because otherwise services can pass the same token around, basically replay it to other systems, and those systems have no way to know. They have no way to verify that the token was intended for them.
A question about the audience claim.
And I think one reason why it's like confusing is because like this is again something that like should have been done like when we introduced vault secrets in the first place, right? Like for years we've been having users configure their vault instances to not validate the audience claim, right? And like we shouldn't have, right? So it like led us down this path that's hard to get out of. But if we were designing the feature today, it would be opt-in, and we would require users to specify an audience claim. And so I think like since we're taking the opportunity to introduce a breaking change with 15.0, we should be doing it like how we would do it if nothing existed right now, right? And so I think the two pieces are equally as important. One, opt-in. Two, customizable audience claim. I think there's future iterations where we make more claims, like the subject claim, customizable. But I think the bare minimum requirement is that we have it be opt-in and we have configurable audience claims.
So these would have to go together, is what I'm hearing then. The opt-in and the audience claim have to go together.
Yeah, because I think it's better for the end user to have their, whatever they're using these tokens for, whether it's Vault or exchanging for cloud provider credentials or using with a certificate transparency service like Folkio or whatever. It's important that by default, we lead users down a path that results in them setting up a secure system. And so like, I'd hate to like continue down this path where like audience claims are hard coded and users configure their systems to disable audience claim verification. And then we introduce the ability to customize the audience claim, but people already have these systems that they're not going to change out there that are less secure than they should be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The only concern that I have is that will we have like enough capacity to take this in a single iteration? It's 14.10, like toward the end of 14.10, 15.0 starts in a week. So we really need to understand from engineering, this is why we have Mark here, is that if this is something that we are capable of doing, and if not, then we'll need to default to not having this in 15.0 and have it in 15.1, although it's not a desirable experience. Now you mentioned that, okay, this means that we'll tell users, okay, you need to disable the audience claim in your system. But I mean, we are aiming here for the long term. We will have way more users in a year than we have today. Today, we don't have, we have merely like a few thousands of users. And I believe that like in a year, it will be double. So anything that we'll do now does not mean that it will dictate the way users will behave, like most of our users will behave in the future. But I'm not saying let's not do that. I'm just saying let's see if we are capable of doing that in 15.0. And if not, then we'll need to rely on like secrets and like hard code the audience and in 15.1. will
Well-
introduce like the audience claim.
One just point of note, in my testing, in the V2 format of JWT, we include a static audience value. In V1, it doesn't exist. And so if you go to V2, Vault is broken. Like you have to go to your Vault configuration and say, here's the new audience value. And then that becomes like the single value, right? And then if we introduce a customizable version on that, they could either keep that default or push that forward. So if we convert from, if we start using V2 as the standard
one,
format for secrets, they're gonna have to go back and change Vault. And then if they want to customize it more to their Vault server name or a different token, they're gonna have to go back and re-customize it again. So it's kind of, the most ideal is everything gets all done in one swoop, but I agree, it's like kind of hard to.
Yeah, like looking at your implementation of the CI job JWT V2, I think the difference between making the audience claim configurable and not is like so trivial from like a code perspective that there's no reason not to just make it configurable from day one. And I think like, you know, we already have the secrets stanza, like we already have the plumbing for like, you know, mapping like this provider to generating this thing and then injecting it as this environment variable. We're just talking about adding a new ID token provider to the secret stanza. And so like, if we're all bought into going down that path, then the additional configuration option of having the audience claim, I think is, and using that in the token is trivial, because we're not even talking about implementing any of the logic for actually generating JWTs, right? Like all of that stuff exists. It's just pulling this configuration value into that audience claim and then passing it along to the thing that automatically generates JWTs. So like, I think this whole thing is like a 2-day effort, you know, not including testing and rollout and all that.
I mean, we cannot. I mean, again, we there is like, I'm not an engineer, okay, and I don't want to put myself in a commitment for the engineers here. Again, this is why we have Mark, and we can definitely look into it to see if it makes sense. We need to have tests in place. We need to make sure we have the right documentation for all of our users, because it's going to be like a bigger breaking change than what we've expected. So we need to test and make sure that, you know, use cases are working. By the way, I would need your support with that. Like whoever use that, because we don't use it, we don't have like I don't think we have a testing environment to check that the integration works and then, you know, make the right like announcement for our users. So again, if we'll go to that path, we'll definitely need your support in those areas.
Sure. And honestly, I think even writing the documentation for all this is easier if we go ahead and make the audience claim configurable, because the way things stand, we had to document everything, and then we had to layer in a bunch of caveats about the implications of the audience claim not being configurable, right? So even the documentation was like more complex due to the lack of this capability, I think. So
do you think the audience claim should be like a mandatory field underneath secret? That's what we're saying. There is no way user will configure it without audience claim. That's what we're saying, right?
Yes, and I think you would have the question is do you have a default value or not? So for example, GitHub has a default value. I think it's the full project URL or something, which is not the most ideal audience value, but it's probably a good default. But yeah, it would always be included.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we can introduce default later on, I guess. Like this is not something that we should focus on right now.
One thing on the syntax, Marshall, looking at your suggestion around underneath the variable, we have to expand that out in the existing Vault configuration. So you want to be able to to customize the audience claim for a vault. For a vault implementation as well, right? I think it's
Yeah, and I
Would that-
and I think it's the epic. This is the part that like I think, you know, is gonna take somebody digging in on the implementation details a little bit more. Because right now, you know, the vault provider works by assuming that it's set to CI job JWT. If you have just named it arbitrarily, then
no,
vault
it's
part-
actually it's a custom piece of code that doesn't use an environment variable. So one of the guys, Joe, he went and searched it out, and so it doesn't. Our vault integration, the premium feature, does not use an environment variable. It doesn't use CI job 1, v1, or v2.
but it uses the same value,
It
right?
uses
That's
the same
assigned.
values, right? Yeah, but it's a different piece of code that is used when it because it gets that data gets embedded into the payload that goes to the runner.
Mhm. But what you're pointing out is valid, that there needs to be some relationship between what, at least optionally, like the token that you're explicitly specifying and the subsequent secrets that are being injected. Right. I think that's what you're getting at. Because if I call it like my custom JWT or my vault JWT, I have to make the vault integration aware that that's the token that I want to use. Right.
The token, no, because I think like if I'm looking at what you just linked in the epic, let me share my screen because it's easier to see what I'm looking at. I guess it's this. Sure. So this here is what you're talking about.
Yeah. Can you zoom just a little bit?
Maybe. Yes.
Yeah. So, and this example is not great looking back at it, because like it's more compelling if you have one JWT that's for vault and then another JWT that is for like the Google provider, right? So like imagine that you're injecting two separate tokens, right? One is because you want to generate Google application credentials, and the other is because you want to inject some database password from Vault.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this, I guess my point is like, do we reference a variable that you've created, I guess, at another level, right? So if we merge that with your other comment, wherever that went. In the opt-in version, I guess that's here, right? So you're kind of creating JWT, Google, JWT, Vault.
Mhm.
Is that what you're saying, to kind of bring those together, or we would add ID token and audience to underneath
See the other tab,
one.
your last tab.
Yeah, I lost it here, I guess. Yeah, I think you would bring ID token under here, right? So when you have a vault provider,
No,
that's where I'm trying to get. That's where I'm kind of confused about. We need one that we need to be able to specify the audience for a vault integration, which is different than for a generic JWT token that could be used for Google or could be used for something, etc.
Yeah, I think ID token makes sense. Like where you see the Vault keyword, I think is where the ID token keyword belongs. But then separately, we need to solve the relationship between, like, it's as if you want to define variables and then consume them in the same configuration. You know what I mean? Like this token here could be something that's coming from a environment, like a CI environment variable that's configured in the project, right? Like I think we need to not be opinionated about where that's coming from. It just happens to be something that's getting defined also in a secret.
You're saying something like this.
Yeah.
Whatever, right?
Right.
Whatever. Or in this case, it's reusable and that you wouldn't want that, but you'd do like one would be Google, one would be Vault or something.
It's valid to use the same token for both places. Like you can specify multiple audiences. So, but the point being, like, we should be able to do it all any way you want to. And yeah.
Yeah. So this would be like Vault. I don't know why this thing won't just. I gotta figure out how to disable like autocomplete. Here and here. This is. So you're saying more like that. And then this becomes. Like that. Yeah. So you define your JWT for Vault, you define it for Google, and then you consume it in the individual providers.
Yeah.
And if we had another, any other job that needed it, but it like this is a premium feature. This doesn't exist. But you're just saying for a future that's possible, right? We could have other providers, and then somewhere else we would potentially consume, these environment variables that were created.
Yeah, because they can be consumed in the pipeline itself, right? Like all the Google application credentials example and the Vault example are both like nice to haves that are embedded in the runner, right?
Yeah.
But you can do everything that those things are doing in a pipeline too, like in a script. And so making it possible to do it either way is what you want to end up with, I think.
Yeah. Something there.
Yeah, so I guess the only question is like whether we like have some default value for token, right? So that can be skipped, but I don't know. It's a little bit clunky if you're injecting multiple secrets from Vault, right? To have to specify that token again and again and again. But I don't have a good solve for that, nor do I think it's like something that we absolutely need to solve right now.
And with this example that you're showing, Brad, is that the reason why we want to include the audience claim in this, in this initial deliverable? Because without that configuration, we can't do those top things there.
Yeah, we'd have, otherwise we're down to a single default value, and then you're turning off validation. Well, you're still validating the default value, but it doesn't prevent the replay attack. Provide a replay attack. Like if AWS were to send it over to Google, Google potentially could accept that.
And like by default, Google, you see the workload identity provider part there. This is the default value that Google requires the audience claim be set to. So like right now, if users want to use JWT's the way that we support currently, they have to go and disable or like manually override the
When you set up the workload provider, like I did,
this
I
is what
did this
Google
one.
expects by default.
Yeah, they have a default value of what they could expect, or you got to set it on one side or the other, right? Like it just has to match. And I've got an example project where I set it up in Google, and we tell Google expect I think it's the default value we're using in V2 is like the server name or something.
Right.
And then same in AWS. AWS just expects some matching string. Doesn't have to be sts.amazon.com. It just has to match. It could be, foo and foo on both sides, as long as it matches. I can see that. To your point, I don't know if there's value in, well, this is an implementation detail, which I don't know. So can we consume this expression from here? Or is it some kind of recursive lookup thing? I don't know.
I think that for this requirement, as I mentioned, it's like you are creating like a secret management system within GitLab in our syntax, and that requires, as I mentioned at the beginning, it requires the right research and the right business case in order to go ahead and build that. I know there is an epic on that, by the way, and I'm planning to do something about it this year, but it's definitely not something that we'll be able to achieve at the moment. Yeah, so I think for now we need again to default back to like using like the JWT token that we have today, opt in, and if we can configure the audience, then configure the audience. We need to be very humble in like what we are aiming for a single iteration, because there are always like forced prioritization, there are always like unexpected work that is coming, and we can plan everything and it looks great, and then suddenly we miss the deadline, and now we have nothing to give our customers. Yeah,
I think as it relates to that opt-in, I know we're at time, so I'll just say for that opt-in issue, I think the only touch up that Dove, if you're going to make this change, is just to remove that future enhancement reference in the description area to include that in. And then if that's the approach that we're going to try to kind of estimate out as far as the effort, then the next steps will be for us to, and I'll talk with Avio tomorrow about what the what that effort looks like, so that if it's achievable, then we'll know pretty clearly what we can deliver in 15.0.
I think the only path forward that I see that doesn't involve going that extra mile is to have a new keyword. I don't see how we can reconcile leveraging the existing secrets keyword for controlling JWT token injection and not like that extra step that Brad just laid out of specifying which token gets used for each of the different secret injection providers.
yeah. I mean, we can introduce that keyword. I mean, if we wanted to be nested underneath secrets, so we'll have like secrets, and then we'll have like, your example, you had like the CI job, JWT, or maybe JWT token, or like we need to have a preserved keyword for now, and then specify the audience claim for that, and for that token will be our path forward, at least for this specific issue. I mean, we can use this example that you linked in your issue, this one, if everyone agreed, link it in there. Or maybe we can use like maybe CI job JWT because it is the actual value of the variable can be confusing for users because they would think, okay, I'm using the CI job JWT, I can use like any other token. So maybe we can brainstorm a bit with our technical writer about what would be like the maybe just JWT, just to opt it in, and then we can continue later on and like saying, okay, we can configure any secret that you want in the future.
Now, we are also going to flip. Are we going to flip CI job JWT V1, V2, and the default all in 15.0 as well? I mean, it's not hard work, but I mean,
yes,
I mean,
this is what
they have to be removed, right? Otherwise, it's not opt-in still. Like by default, neither of those variables can be injected anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the variable that will be injected will be V2, but we won't call it V2. It will be like the JWT token, like the default one. So yes, we are flipping. This is done. I mean, this is like already scheduled for 15.0. This is like an enhancement on top of it, and the idea is to have like a single breaking change that will change this for our users. Yeah, that's
yeah,
the proposal.
so they have to opt in and accept the new format at the same time. I think it's
Yes,
a good,
exactly.
you know, one time.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can.
Will there
I
be
think we
any
can,
way to backward take the V1 format?
You can set the audience to an empty string, right?
We'd have to specifically remove it because you can't send the token to the provider with audience and blank.
Or setting it to null. I mean, either way would do the same thing.
Yeah, like we would have to remove it from the payload of the token, right? Like to go back to the V1 format, because it also changes the issuer as well. The issuer string didn't include HTTP or HTTPS.
HTTP, yeah. This is a change that the user will need to do. I mean, this is, so until this conversation happened, what users would need to do is like update the issuer by adding the HTTP, this all URL.
Yep.
With this change, they need to do this and update their syntax. Those will be like two changes that they'll need to do. The first one that I mentioned is already scheduled and weighted, and our engineers start already looking at it. So it is like, for me, this is done. This is going to happen. This is bound to happen. This is now an extension on top of that. So we don't need to worry about now they want to go back. No, we won't allow them to go back, basically.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the issue with this proposal. We can take another round of feedback on just like the name of the token, maybe tweak it a bit, but introducing a new keyword, and then configure the audience claim and see if what other engineers are saying about the probability of getting this in 15.0. That's okay with everyone?
Yeah. Dover, you're going to make those changes before tomorrow? Or actually, to start your day tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
That's fine.
At the beginning of my day.
I just added as a talking point with Aviel too, so then we can at least close those loops as quick as possible in preparation of 15.0.
Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.